Every year, millions of Americans reject a pivotal right that deals with the very framework of our country, and that is the right to elect representatives to voice our issues and objectives and act on them. I bet at least one of you has rejected that right recently. But instead of complaining about our government, you have the opportunity to do something to make changes. If you want to get your voice heard, you should vote in as many elections as possible, including state and local elections. Let's examine why voting is so important to our democracy, how to vote, why no one has an excuse not to vote, and what it means to be an informed voter. I'll begin by explaining the impact of history on voting. It's your constitutional right, and there's countries in the world without it. The United States was formed because we had no input on laws that governed us so far away. The Boston Tea Party was just an example of the civic unrest brought about by the Sons of Liberty. Colonists were fed up with a taxation without government representation through Britain. There are 5 amendments that affect voting rights starting in 1868. These amendments made it easier for citizens to vote. We start with the 14th Amendment. This amendment defined meaning of citizenship. If you're born here, you're automatically a U.S. citizen. This should have increased the amount of voting, but it did not. It also gave incentives to states to enforce it, but they didn't do it. Then we move on to the 15th Amendment. This forbids federal or state government to reject voting. Based on race or color. So that increased the voter opportunity as well. 19th Amendment allowed women the right to vote. We go on to the 24th Amendment, which eliminated the poll tax that excluded the poorer voters, making them more apt to vote. And then finally, we have the 26th Amendment that lowered the voting age to 18, potentially increasing voter output turnout as well. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was created to protect all Americans' right to vote, since there was still discrimination toward minority voters. Then we go to countries such as Iraq that provided citizens the right to vote after 50 years of oppression. As I explained, we've had to work hard as a country to secure our civic equality by voting. Here are some reasons why you should vote. The community relies on you to make an intelligent decision on who you want representing your city, county, state, and country. As young people coming of age and new people moving in, the viewpoints in our community are constantly changing. The local election affects us the most since they decide on issues regarding women's health, public school, and discrimination issues. Volunteer to spread viewpoints out in the open, which could translate into new directives for your community. You also can run for office for yourself. Just remember, voting for a president may not result in the changes you expect. He is limited by his party's, he's limited by his party's control of the Senate or House. You heard it was important to vote in all of the elections, not just the federal or state level. But why do people choose not to vote? Here are common reasons why people reject voting and solutions to those problems. People don't like their choice or may not agree with either party, so they decide not to vote. There are more options than the 2 dominant parties. Vote with the candidate that fits most of your beliefs. You don't have to agree with everything the candidate says. Too busy, out of town, ailments or injuries are the top reasons non-voters give as to why they don't vote. Since over 50% of non-voters claim these excuses, there are 2 ways this could be alleviated. First is absentee voting. This allows voting if you're not at home. You can apply for voting by mail if you can't get to the polls or away from home, as I stated. Some states, like Texas, offer early voting in person before election day at any subdivision. not interested in forgetting to vote are other reasons that need a different approach to solve the problem. Now, if you don't know who to vote for, start researching. Making an informed vote is crucial to voting. Before you vote, educate yourself about the candidates. These are different ways to educate yourself. Now, the number one source for 18 to 29-year-old, people our age, for this election is social media at 35%. We need to use multiple sources to get our information. Cable network news, local TV, news websites, and more all provide info for candidates. So it's important to try and vote for all of your elected officials, whether federal, state, or local, if you want them to represent your viewpoints and have your voice heard. So I've told you that it's your constitutional and civic duty to vote, how your community relies on you to vote, some ways that can help people put in their vote, and finally, that it's important to make an informed vote. Many of you are mad about the current state of things in our government. If you're angry or think things can be done differently, we can take those conditions and make some changes. Not just by criticizing, but by voting for the candidates that you would like as your representative. Here's a quote from a famous president. Here's a quote from a great president. Democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard, therefore, is education. Franklin Delano Roosevelt.